These represent the client-specific factors that have an impact on realization of objectives based on the investment policy statement there. So specifically, we will break this one into 5 or 6 points. The first point, number 1, is investor circumstances and wealth. They keep on changing. Investors, circumstances, and wealth. We're saying that the investor circumstances or demands actually keep on changing as an individual actually moves through the life cycle of the individual life cycle. I can be able to demonstrate right over here that an individual has a life cycle like so, similar to the way industries also have their own life cycle. You can break it down like this, like that. So stage 1, 2, 3, and 4, like that. And stage 1 is where an individual is actually born, and they actually go through primary school, secondary school, and so on and so forth. Then as they transit towards the second stage like that, maybe you can say that this stage could be high school and moving into university, and right over here as they be able to begin getting a job at this stage over here. So in terms of the circumstances, if you look at an individual who was in college vis-a-vis an individual who actually just began working, the risk tolerance or the appetite for increased risk or investments such as equities and maybe other asset classes, including maybe Bitcoin, might be increased for an individual who is actually entered the life cycle of that employment as compared to an individual who is actually approaching retirement. An individual who is actually approaching retirement means that they will be more keen to invest, or they'll be keen to invest in asset classes that are inclined towards bonds. They are fixed income securities and the ones that guarantee, or even real estate that actually provide a steady income stream. So the investor circumstances actually change. As an individual moves, gets the first unemployment like that, there is probably maybe a 2-3 year period before they actually get married. So we are saying that you might find that those circumstances, even the amount of money that you actually get is actually going to be on the increase. So those are some of the circumstances that actually change with time. Those need to be constantly monitored so that we can be able, or the portfolio managers can be able to take cognizance and factor those elements as they rebalance the portfolio, or as they are monitoring the portfolio. So we can say circumstances, investor circumstances and wealth. We are saying the circumstances change over the life cycle of an investor. Wealth changes, an increase in wealth changes implies, it should be implies that the investor will have increased appetite for risk, or the risk tolerance may be increased. We are saying this: if we have got more money, you can use this side. If initially your wealth was that amount, like that, your ability to take, or your appetite for your ability to ward off external shocks, changes in economic and macroeconomic factors, and so on and so forth, will actually be less as compared to when your wealth is actually like so. As well, your ability to take up more risk is limited right over here as compared to when your ability, or when your wealth has actually increased to that size. And so you need to monitor, as a portfolio manager, investment banker, and so forth, we need to monitor the portfolio so that we can be able to address changes or circumstances actually change. So in terms of circumstances, the circumstances could be based on, maybe you could be able to change the job that you actually are in, and that would actually impact on the amount of wealth that is, or savings that you actually have, like that. So you change a job, you're initially getting 40,000 right over here. Now it increases to now maybe say 120,000 over here. It means that the circumstances are changed. You might move into a new house like that, or you might be able to now have the capacity to take up a mortgage. that is what we're saying is in form of a circumstance. It actually changes. Once it actually changes, that needs to be monitored by the portfolio manager, especially when you're investing in for private wealth clients. For institutional investors, we are saying investor circumstances might actually change. We are saying that if you're managing for a portfolio for banks or for insurance companies, maybe because of the circumstances as far as the coronavirus, maybe the impact of coronavirus and pandemic actually may mean that individuals may have increased appetite for insurance products so that they can be able to shield themselves or protect themselves from the adverse effects of the virus over there. So circumstances change because of external factors there. As well, it means that the wealth for institutional investors will also change. So the wealth might be limited because of some circumstances, such as, or because of some changes in maybe the returns generated by organizations was actually reduced. For some organizations, actually went down because of the pandemic. And so the appetite to take up investment products also tends to reduce thereafter. So we're saying that investor circumstances for both individual investors and institutional investors actually changes there. The second point is liquidity. So I can say that's number one. So number two is liquidity. We are saying for individual investors, you find that the liquidity needs keeps on changing. If you want to fund, maybe say a holiday, if you wish to formulate to have a portfolio that actually funds a holiday maybe in August, that means that based on how much you're actually saving into the pension fund, that the portfolio manager needs to take cognizance or needs to note that this family goes on holiday every August. So we need to place those funds in asset classes that will be able to actually generate sufficient funds so that when we actually liquidate, we can be able to liquidate some funds so that they can be able to enjoy their holiday. The key word there is liquidate, and it's almost a synonym as liquidity over there. It's derived from the word liquidity there. So liquidity needs also need to be examined or monitored so that they can be able to let the portfolio manager meet those needs there. And they keep on changing. This year you want to fund maybe a wedding. Next year you want to fund maybe say an individual would want to fund maybe you could say a holiday travel. They want to fund a comfortable retirement. So you need to ensure that the portfolio is also maintained in such a way that it can be able to meet the needs as and when they fall due. For institutional investors, what happens is that they need to also, depending on what kind of institutional investor, if it's an insurance company or a bank, and more precisely for banks, we're saying that liquidity needs are a concern and to also be monitored so that they can ensure that when actually require their funds, they can be able to have access to them. So, and as far as liquidity needs are concerned, we say that, so I'm saying that the need to have access to investor funds as and when they fall due needs to be monitored so as to allow the portfolio manager to adjust or tilt the portfolio towards realization of objectives based on the changing liquidity needs for the client. I should actually add that for the client. For the client. In this case, the client can be institutional investors and individual investors. Moving on, time horizon. We are saying both individual and institutional investors have different time horizons. And those time horizons keep on changing. A time horizon that is, say, 5 years needs or requires the portfolio manager to be notified that the time horizon is 5 years. Our investment horizon is maybe say 5 years, and we want to generate a return of maybe say 15%. So both institutional investors and individual investors need to notify the portfolio manager so that they can be able to plan ahead. Planning ahead means that they need to come up with models that can be able to fit within the time span actually desired by the client. In this case, the client is institutional and individual investors. The need to have access to funds after a specific period of time is crucial, so that the portfolio manager can be able to invest in asset classes that are, say, 5 years old, based on that example I've initially given, just given. So this is the time horizon, 5 years, 0, 5 years. The portfolio manager needs to have access to investment or asset classes that have got 5 years, that are 5 years old, so that on realization of either that period of 5 years, they may be able to meet certain liabilities after that period. So the fund needs to grow from maybe say 1 billion to around 1.5 billion within a span of 5 years. So with the knowledge of this, the portfolio manager will go ahead and try and identify asset classes that will generate sufficient returns within that 5-year period that will be able to actually meet this kind of liability there. And so that's why we're saying that time horizon is crucial when trying to monitor the portfolio. So time horizon, because it's a key point, I should put it in blue here. So time horizon number 3. So we're saying time horizon, the need to have a definite time horizon is important for the portfolio manager, since it allows him or her to identify asset classes that meet the time period. They will also be required to generate sufficient returns within that time period. Why? To be able to meet up the liabilities, the future liabilities. This is for both institutional and individual investors.